Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Workflowing Towards Success, Streamlining Major Changes for Student Success. This is a re-recording of the presentation that we presented at Slate Summit 2025. So my name is Allison Beebe. I am a Slate Student Success Implementation Strategist here at Carnegie. I've been with Carnegie for about 2 years. Prior to Carnegie, I worked in a small school in upstate New York, doing just about everything one can do in the world of student success. I worked in TRIO Student Support Services. I was an academic advisor, an academic coach, an adjunct faculty member, all of the things. And now I get to play in Slate all day, which is the dream, but I am still located in upstate New York. And I'll pass it over to Bailey.
Howdy, everyone. My name's Bailey Rathfield. I'm with Texas A&M University. And prior to coming to Aggieland, I was at Valdosta State University, where I met Allison, and we built a majority of this process. It's great to be here with you all. All right, and getting into our agenda today. So we're going to go over why we needed a better process. We'll give you a step-by-step walkthrough of the change of major process itself. Then we'll go into a technical deep dive of how we built the process and why we built things the way they are. And then finally, we'll go into the future planning and how we can make this process better. Okay, so getting into the background and the strategy of this. So as I said, this was kind of a brainchild of ours when we were at Valdosta State University working on this. And a lot of this process was aimed to kind of fix some of the issues with the current change of major process that was at VSU. So with any process in higher education, a lot of forms were kind of sprinkled everywhere. Students were kind of up in the air on what they needed to do, who they needed to go to, and kind of what the process was overall. So we got together with all of the major stakeholders, figured out a plan forward, and started looking towards Slate to figure out what we could implement there to make the process easier for students to change their major. Why did we move this into Slate? So we moved this process into Slate because Slate has a very streamlined process, and it allows us to kind of create the easy workflows that are standardized throughout the entirety of the change of major itself. Throughout the process, we also did some planning with the academic advisors and other major stakeholders in the registrar to make sure that the process itself for the change of major was very easy for the student and easy for the staff. So that way, everything kind of ran the same paths and everybody was kind of always informed of what was going on during the process. And then we also prepared with a number of different resources by building some training guides, some videos and other things to inform staff how to utilize the process and how to inform students to use the process as well.
All right, thanks, Bailey. Now we're going to jump into the process overview. So this overview really serves just to give you a high-level view of how students and faculty interact with and experience this process. After we get through this, we're going to do all the behind-the-scenes nitty-gritty of the build, but this is really just meant to be that high level to give you an idea of what exactly it is that we are showing you today and what you're looking at as we go through all of the behind-the-scenes later on. So first and foremost, for the change of major process, the first thing that a student or potentially their advisor will do is submit the change of major request form. The top half of this form here is going to be all pre-populated fields. And then we have the actual change of major request towards the bottom of the form, which is pretty bare bones. There's only a couple things that students need to indicate to get this process started, removes a lot of the barrier to entry that Valdosta was experiencing with their previous process, paper applications, and having to have things emailed all around. This is the short and sweet version. All of the fields that you're seeing at the bottom that indicate which major the student's interested in, the reason for wanting to change their major, and so on, are all also entity scoped fields. We did do a change of major entity for this process, which Bailey's going to talk about a little bit later on. Once the student submits that change of major form, which is really just raising their hand and saying, I would like to change my major, here's the major I want to move into and why, then their form is going to automatically move into our change of major workflow, and it'll land in this form submitted bin. So from here, the student is going to move through the process of review, which will happen with their academic advisor. Once the review form is submitted, the student gets a notification via email that their form has been received and that they need to meet with their academic advisor. At that point, the advisor is notified that has been assigned to the particular review of the change of major request. We'll get into that later too. Valdosta had some pretty unique requirements for the assigning of advisors to review each change of major request. So we accounted for that. An assignment or advisor rather will be assigned, and the request will move into the advisor appointment needed bin until the appointment happens between the student requesting the change of major and their advisor. So it'll hang out here until then. Once the appointment happens, the advisor has a couple of different options. They can go ahead and update the student's major. They can say, you know what, we met with this student and there actually shouldn't be a major change here. They're better where they are. We had a discussion and we're good with that, and they can close the request. Or they can say, you know, I'm really not the person who should have been assigned to review this. I'm going to pass this along to a colleague. That all happens on the same review form, which again, we'll look at here in just a little bit. If the change of major needs to happen, the advisor will indicate the major that needs to be added, removed, whatever change needs to happen for that student on the reader review form, and then they'll send it off to the registrar's office for review. The registrar never actually has to enter Slate. They are sent an email with all of the changes that they need to make in Banner, which is Valdosta's SIS. They make those changes in the SIS, and then there is a very cool auto-submitting form that we will show you that closes out the request for the student. Once the request is closed, the student's change of major request form moves into the resolution complete bin, and everyone involved gets an email to let them know that the request has been resolved, the advisor and the student as well. All right, now I'll pass it over to Bailey so we can get into some of the behind the scenes of this build.
Alrighty, getting into the form itself. So this is our change of major form, and these are the fields that we require the students or the faculty and staff submitting the form on behalf of them to fill out for the change of major process. So on this form, it's a very simple form flow. We collect a bunch of the students' information, and a lot of that is pre-filled to kind of show the student what information we have on them, and then also give them some options to update said information by contacting the registrar should they need to. We also have some fields on the form that are actively pulling in the information about the major that they'd like to change to, or the career that coincides with that, to kind of give them some different options on ways to fill this form out pretty easily. We also have some entity scoped fields, which allows us to do some cool things in Slate. And then also for some mapped and unmapped major fields, you choose your own adventure there, and it can kind of be configured differently for each institution. And then finally, also some include or not include the career information that allows a student to kind of be more specific about their purpose there and kind of why this change of major was necessary. Okay, so looking here, this is our major selector field. This is a pre-filled or a pre-populated prompt list from our student success major list. This kind of allows students to select the major that they're wanting to go to, even if they don't know natively what the major is called. This kind of makes things a little bit easier for them and allows them to kind of bridge any sort of gap in their knowledge for their major itself. And then getting into this section, so this is the reason for the major change. This allows students to kind of be very open and transparent with the advisors on kind of why they may be wanting to change the major, whether it's career issues with faculty during their courses, issues with specific classes, what have you. This allows the student to kind of let somebody know kind of what's going on there and see if really a change of major is needed there. And then also we do have the career specifically that they're looking for. This allows the advisors to kind of plan ahead, prepare any sort of materials that they may need for career advice or anything like that, or even schedule appointments with the Career Opportunities Office. And both of these fields are entity scope to allow us to collect that information over time for the student. And then the walk-in section. This is a hidden field for internal submission only. What this allows us to do is to kind of triage things as they come in. So obviously we want to keep, the priority of this change of major very high on advisors' docket and make sure that it's easy for them to find. Since they're taking regular advising appointments, walk-ins, and other kinds of appointments all at the same time, This allows them to see, when there's a change of major, and then also allows them to denote upon form submission that this is indeed a walk-in, and they can submit the form on behalf of the student there as well during those appointments. All right, and then the status. So this is set by default to active upon form submission. This is read-only. This allows us to kind of do some cool things with some auto-submitting forms, and allows us to kind of triage the change of major throughout the process as well. Okay, getting into the entity build and why we chose an entity. So we chose a person scoped entity for a number of different reasons, but primarily the main reason was to track this information over time. We really wanted to see if there was any trends, be able to report back on that, and see if there was anything that we kind of needed to fix up on the backend side of VSU. This also allowed us to use some of the prompt lists that we already had available, and then also do some cool things with auto-submitting forms that we'll go into a little bit later in the presentation.
All right, now let's talk about the workflow and the review forms that go along with the workflow. And this powers a good portion of this build, so we're going to spend a little bit of time here. To recap what I talked about a little bit earlier, this is the standard flow for a change of major request. So the form is submitted, lands in the form submitted bin, gets assigned to a particular advisor, moves over into the advisor appointment needed bin. The advising appointment happens between the advisor and the student. They have those three options. They can either close the request, pass it on to someone else, or complete the major change. If they complete the major change, it's going to move to the registrar's office. Registrar makes the updates in Banner, submits that auto-submitting form that they got in their email, which we'll look at in just a minute, I promise. I know we keep referencing that. And then the request will be moved into the complete bin. So this is the standard pathway that the change of major request will move in. Now let's look at the behind the scenes that are all powered by these review forms. So going back to the beginning, form is first submitted. You can see up here in the right-hand corner, the form that is in this form submitted bin. We have the ability to assign an advisor. So here we've assigned Barry as the advisor who's going to review this particular change of major request. And then you can add some comments to that advisor as to why you are assigning this to them. This process could very easily be automated as well. If at your institution, every single review form should be reviewed by that student's assigned advisor or by someone in a student success team of reviewers, we could very easily write rules to make that happen. But Valdosta prefers to do this manually. Bailey, do you want to talk a little bit about why that is?
Yeah, sure. So the manual assignment of advisors just allows us to kind of keep things clean. Like I said earlier, the advisors are handling multiple different types of appointments throughout the day. So this was kind of our internal solution to allow them to kind of triage those on a need-by-need basis. If it's a change of major process, it's likely that they've already been in touch with their advisor at this point. So their advisor is expecting them. It also allows them to kind of free up said advisors upon the submission of these change of majors, and also to select the correct advisor. Should something seem off, or there needs to be a conversation on the staff side, they can get that to the correct person easier during those one-off cases.
Thanks, Bailey. Something we heard too after presenting this at Summit and chatting with folks was this is also a really good use case for if you want the student to be reviewed by an advisor in the school in which they're basically applying to in their new major. So if they're currently a business student, but they want to be in biology, and that's a totally different subset of advisors, you may not want their specific advisor who's in the business school to review their biology change of major. You might want someone from the biology school or the science school rather to review that. So that this gives you the flexibility to make those changes as well. All right, bringing it back around. So only thing that needs to happen in the form submitted bin is someone from the triage team at Valdosta will go in and say, yep, after looking at this, this should be reviewed by this person, and then they'll send it forward. Once that happens, an email is going to go to the student that looks like this. It's going to say, hi student, we got your change of major request and you need to meet with your advisor, in this case, Alicia, to talk about it. And if you click this big red button in the email, it's going to take you to your advisor, again, in this case, Alicia's availability in Slate, so you can go ahead and schedule that appointment with her. At the same time that happens, an email will also go out to the assigned advisor. This is, hi advisor, Allison submitted a change of major request form and is going to be coming your way. Click this button to review that change of major request. They can also call this email back up when they're actually meeting with the student, because it's going to take them right into the reader if they click on that review request button, so that they can submit the form they need to submit while meeting with the student. So made everything nice and transparent there. Okay. Next thing that's going to happen is the appointment between the advisor and the student would take place. At that time, again, the advisor is going to call up that email, click on that button, and it'll take them right to the appropriate student's record in the reader and give them the ability to fill out the correct reader review form. We look in the upper right again, we can see the very top part of what is actually a pretty lengthy reader review form. It's got a lot of logic and a lot of options. So here are the 3 options the advisor can take that we've been talking about. No major change needed. So we talked to the student. Maybe they were just really worried about this one class, but they don't actually need to change their major. Their career goals are the same. And we talk them down from the very nervous ledge of having to deal with a particular class or a particular professor. They're going to stay in their program. Great. Select no major change needed, and they'll actually move into that no update needed bin, which we can see here. Once that would happen, as a quick segue, either the change of major request is marked as complete because no change needed to happen, or it was actually completed. The student will be notified either way anytime they're moved into either of those resolution bins with an email that just says, hey, your change of major request has been complete, just to give them the heads up that everything is done and they've done everything they need to do. Okay, going back to our change of major assignment form, other option, instead of just closing out the change of major request, would be to assign them to somebody else. So we're looking this over, and maybe it's that same situation we were talking about a second ago. This should really be reviewed by somebody in the biology department. This is out of my depth, says the student's current advisor. So I'm going to push this over to a different advisor and say, hi, new advisor, please review this because they're coming to your program, not mine, or whatever your reasons are to let them know why you've made this change. If this happens, then the student will get a new email letting them know, hey, you actually need to meet with this other advisor instead. Here's their scheduling availability. Make this new appointment and you'll be able to close the request at that time. Last but not least is actually making a major change, which is what we're here to do. So there's a couple of different options that populate when the advisor selects, yep, we do need to update either this major, concentration, or minor for this student. We opted to allow them to change any of their programs with this form. And actually, since creating this presentation, we've made the original form a little bit more robust as well, so students can also indicate a change of minor or a change of concentration with that initial request also. So we get to this point, the advisor will select update major, concentration, or minor, and then they have another choice to make. At Valdosta, students could have a primary, secondary, or tertiary major, concentration, and minor. We can update all 3. We can update just the primary and the tertiary, whatever combination we need to do to serve the student, this form can accommodate. For this example, we are just looking at primary, major, concentration, and minor. Once that is selected, we'll have a section of the form that populates with the student's current primary, major, concentration, and minor, and then the ability to add in the new programs that the student needs to be added into, or to remove any current programs as well. We probably wouldn't be removing the current major, but we might need to remove current concentration or minor, or remove secondary major, so on and so forth. So you'll see some options for pulling programs out of the student's course load as well. For the new primary major, new primary concentration, and new primary minor, you'll see that these are not select lists. These are text boxes. Valdosta's preference was for advisors to be able to manually type in the names of the programs they need the registrar to implement for these students. Billy, do you want to touch on that one a little bit as well and why that decision was made?
Sure. So the main reason behind this is just for ease of use for the registrar. Obviously, we can manipulate the system to kind of display majors and minors in a way that's easy for them to understand, but to get this out of the door and to get this into the hands of the advisors and the registrar's usage, it was just easier to do it this way and make sure that everything is verbatim the exact way that they need it for the registrar. This allows the advisors to kind of freehand this into a legible way that is consistent with what the registrar is used to seeing.
Awesome. And if that doesn't speak to y'all too, this is another area where you could very easily map these fields. You could have form fields with the current list of majors, minors, concentrations, all the things. You could map it to the entity, depending on what your processes, your goal outcomes are. There's a few different ways to do this, but for our friends at Valdosta, leaving this free text was the easiest way to make this happen. All right. One thing I left out, and I'm actually going to back up one slide, is once this form is submitted, and we'll see at the very bottom of the form, there's a button for send to registrar. The advisor will fill out this entire form and indicate whatever changes need to be made. They'll hit that send to registrar checkbox, and then they'll submit the form. When that happens, the form itself in the workflow is going to move into the sent to registrar bin. And the registrar's office is going to get an email with this very cool auto-submitting form that we've been teasing for the last 20 minutes or so. So I'm going to pass things over to Bailey so we can take a look at what that actually looks like.
All right, y'all. Getting into the email automations and the SIS import. So this is the email that we have been talking about this entire presentation. This is the one that goes to the registrar. And so why did we do it this way? Well, the main goal was to make this as easy as possible on the registrar without them having to learn a new system, get a new login, all that kind of jazz. So the quickest and easiest way was to put as much information as possible in a legible, clean, easy to read fashion, and then give them that cool auto-submitting form functionality to denote that this process has been complete. So what you can see here is that we have the student details and their current academic majors. So basically the point of this is to give them the before and the after is in that requested update section. And this lets the registrar know very quickly, very easily what needs to change based upon that form that was just submitted by the advisor. All right, so getting into the form itself. So as you can see here, this is the auto-submitting form that's going to pop up once that button is clicked. And that saving update in progress, this is the custom script section that will submit that form and close the window out. And then the entity GUID and the update status. So this is matching upon the entity of the correct change of major. And then also updating that status to complete once the registrar clicks that button. And both of these are hidden. That way there's no interaction. All of this is done based upon the script. Okay, and so this is the direct link that is in that little auto-submitting button. This is what pulls there and sends the correct information over for that specific entity and that specific change of major. So as you can see here, we've got the correct form link. We've got the student GUID because we want to match on the correct student. We've got the correct entity, which would be the change of major entity. And then we also have the specific version of that entity, so that specific change of major that that student has submitted. And then this is going to be that script that you saw that says saving in progress. And this is just a quick snippet that you can easily add to your instance wherever you may need an auto-submitting form. All right, so the SIS import, basically what we did here was we leveraged a student success import that was already existing to kind of update the information that the registrar was in Banner and updating there to pull it back over into the Slate instance. So that way everything's very seamless. It shows up in the correct systems, shows up in Slate, everybody's happy. And that red box right there is specifically the area that gets updated. So you've got the primary major, the major concentration, and the major minor. This will show the secondary, tertiary, and so on as well. All right, and then future planning. So how can we make this process better? How can we update it? There's a number of different ways that we've kind of considered here. So obviously we can add some more entity scoped fields upon, new data needs. If there's something that we find in the future that we just don't have a data point for, obviously we could add something like that to the entity itself to collect that. We could also add a change of major custom tab to the person record. This would allow us to kind of see those change of majors over a period of time if the student's got more than just one. That way we can kind of denote if there's, an issue, if the student's having a difficult time, and kind of get some extra support for the student if needed. And then also if entity rules should be released, then that's where we can kind of automate some cool things with this process as well. And that's something that we're looking forward to.
All right, y'all. Thanks so much for joining us to learn a little bit more about how we built out Valdossa's change of major process. I'm going to leave our contact information up here on the screen for just a moment. If you have any questions about anything that we built, I know we just kind of went over a lot and we couldn't show every little piece of everything. So if you have questions on how this build went down, please feel free to reach out to us via email, and we would be happy to chat. And we hope to see you in future presentations and next year's Slate Summit, hopefully, if we didn't get to connect with you this year. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all soon.
Thank you.